All right, we are in Create with Code in Unity. We are in Unit 4 in the final lesson of this. In lesson 4.4, we have our player, we have our enemy, we have our spawn, excuse me, our power up indicator. All those things are created, and we're ready to create our levels and for our loops and waves. This game gets kind of crazy and hard to play. It's good for you to challenge your friends to see if they can actually play this game. We are going to start to make our code actually look a lot better as well. So let's get into this. So first off, let's start by going into making our script look a lot nicer and cleaner the way that it should. We're going to start by creating. So right now we have our instantiate an enemy in our spawn manager. Well, that's just one enemy. We need to actually create many enemies. Like we need a lot of enemies, but we need to create a lot of enemies. As they're destroyed, once we destroy one, we need to create two. Once we destroy two, we need to create three, and so on and so forth. So we need to figure this one out. So we need to take this instantiate and put it into a for loop. And let's see what we're going to do with this. I think that we are going to start by creating this for loop. It's interesting. They kind of gave us some code as if we had already started to create this. So in our start. Let's go ahead and start this by saying we're going to start by creating by calling a function. So usually when you start a when you have a void start, usually you're calling functions, and you will probably, if this is your first time in any type of programming, then you might not know this, but this is usually how things work. So you would usually start by calling functions within this, and this is to keep your code clean. So you would probably call functions several times or call your function, and this would be, so you would call things in your start, and then down below you would have your functions. So let's go ahead and put our function down here where we're going to create this spawn enemy wave. So we're going to do our void spawn enemy wave. Let's get rid of that semicolon and put in our curly brackets instead. And in that spawn enemy wave is where we're going to take this instantiate into here. So we can get rid of it here. If you know me, usually I would just comment it out right here, just so I kind of know where it is. So normally I would just put the comments there to say, hey, that's where it was. But we're good enough at this now. We can just go ahead and delete it out of there. So our void is looking nice and clean now. So we know when the game starts, we're going to call the spawn enemy wave. And we are going to not just have we can check to make sure that this works. Let's go ahead and hit start and make sure this still works. Again, I don't like to go very far into my code without things working. So again, save, make sure that this still works. Let's go ahead and save, let this run, and make sure that I still get an enemy. Again, don't do too much before you actually check. Yes, I got an enemy. Cool. All right, that's all I wanted to see was make sure I still got my enemy. Don't do a whole bunch of work without checking. I'm telling you now, I have seen students who have gone through so much work and not know where their error was. And it's so frustrating to have to go back. So do something, check it, make sure it works. Do something else, check it, make sure that it works. In this, we're going to be making a for loop. So we know that we want to be able to let's start with 4 enemies. Let's just try this first up. So let's say we want to actually start with 4 enemies. This is just how we might just start things off, just to see if this works. This isn't necessarily what we're going to do, but let's just go ahead and see if this works. So we're going to do this for, this isn't how we're going to end up. Let's just say this. So to do a for loop, which we have not done before, I don't think we've done this. I'm not sure. Again, forgive me if I forget what we've done in this class. While 4 is, let me go ahead and write this out and then I'll explain what's going on here. Because again, some of you might not have ever gotten a really good explanation as to what things are. Some of you might just be coming in here just following the instructions and not really understanding what things are. And I would like to explain this to you. It would help if I actually put in the right letters here. All right, so this, again, a for loop. I totally forgot about doing my curly brackets the right way. And so, so when you create a for loop, you're going to do something for whatever is inside of this. So when you do something for a certain amount of time, you could say for 3, right? You could just say, you just put the number 3 and it would do it 3 times. And that would be just fine. You could say for 6 and it would run it 6, right? It would just do it for 6. But while instead, what we're going to do here is we're going to declare an, actually I didn't do this right. So int I, so we're going to declare our int is an integer. And we're going to call it an int I. Well, int I, we're naming it our integer. We're going to name it, we're going to give it a variable of I, which is very typical. Int I of 0. We're going to start it with, while I is equal to 0, we're going to start it off at 0. And while I is less than, oh, that should be an I. Well, and I see my students do this all the time too. They put a 1 there. While I is less than 3, we're going to run this. And each time we run this, we're going to also increase I, each time through I is, int is going to equal, or int is going to add plus. Plus means +1. So so let's go ahead and write this out. So it is first off, plus means int would be, it would be I equals I plus 1. That's what plus means. So I plus int plus means it will actually be int plus 1, but our int is equal. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. That should be I equals I plus 1. What? Okay, I equals I plus 1. Let me get this right. So our int, we're naming it I, and I is going to start off being equal to 0. While I is less than 3, we're going to run this. Each time around, we're going to add I. It's going to change by 1. So the first time through, I is equal to 0. We're going to run this. The next time through, I is going to then change to 1. It's still less than 3. We're going to run this. Next time through, I plus 1. I is going to be less. Is I is going to equal to be 2. Is I less than 3? Yes. Let's run it again. Great. Then we're going to check it. I plus is 3. We're going to say run it. That's our third time. We're going to say is I a less than 3? No, it's now not less than 3, so it's no longer going to be doing this anymore. I hope that made sense. So again, let's just one more time. So I starts off equal to 0. Is I less than 3? Yes. Let's go and run this. We're going to say I plus 1. So again, we do this. We check this. If it's this, then, so this is while, right? So we do this while. So first off, let's go ahead and talk about this. So let's go ahead and get this line here. So int, we're declaring, the int is, we're calling I is equal to 0. That's our first line, right? And then while I is less than 3, we do what is in the brackets. B-R-A-C-K-E-T, brackets. I don't know. Okay. I probably totally spelled that wrong. All right. Okay, then do the last, do the I plus plus. And then repeat. Repeat. Got it? So that's what we do. So we do this, we do this, we do this, then we do this, and then we repeat. So first time through, we do this. And so we're doing this process here. It's kind of like doing a while loop, which, and if you guys know anything about while loops, it's similar to that, because we do something while something is less than 3. But we're actually in doing it cleanly. We're increasing this not in the code, but right here, I plus plus. All right, so we're going to do this. Now we need to be able to, so we got this now. So now we're going to be able to, each time through, we're going to, ideally we would have 3 enemies now if we do this. Hope this works. So ideally we're going to get 3 enemies. And the reason that this makes sense, even though we're only going to the number 2, is because we start off at 0. So let's go ahead and save this. And let's see if we can get 3 enemies on our screen when I hit play. It should happen pretty quickly. When I hit play, I should get 3 enemies on my screen. Yay, I got 3 enemies on my screen, and they're all going to follow me. Woo, that was pretty fast. Okay, so that's kind of how that worked. It worked for me. Hopefully it works for you. Now, ideally, that's not how we would start off our game. And we want to be able to give our for loop a parameter. So we want to be able to say enemies to spawn in a wave, right? So we want to be able to not just say 3. We'd want to be able to say, instead of 3, we're going to say enemies. This should change each time, right? Enemies to spawn. Enemies to spawn is really what we should be doing. We should be able to find what this is, enemies to spawn. So ideally it's not going to be 3. It's going to be like however many, like if we start off with 1, and then the next time it would be 2 and 3 and 4 and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and create that variable of enemies to spawn. So again, enemies to spawn. Oh, so at the start of the game, we want to be able to, we can actually just stay right here. So enemies in a wave would be our int enemies to spawn. So when we actually do this, we're actually passing a parameter into this. So this is actually called passing. We're actually calling passing a parameter. So we're actually passing a parameter. So this is going to be important for those of you that are in my class for you to remember next year when we actually pass a parameter into a function. So we're actually passing a parameter in here. So we got to know what we're passing in here. So we actually have to declare this parameter. We have to declare this. And that means we actually have to say what this means. Like, what are we doing here? Oh, wait, my bad. So we actually have to say, what's this number that's going to go here? And let's go ahead and say 3, right? So what does that mean when it goes here? So instead of 3, we're actually going to say we're going to go int. So we're going to say, hey, we're passing the number 3 into this, and it's going to go in here as an int to enemies to spawn. So we're passing the number 3. We're passing the parameter of 3 into this. So we're passing the parameter of 3. Now I know I lost a few of you there. So let's go ahead and look at this again. So when we call, let's go and do this. So we're calling the function, and we're passing and passing the number 3 into the function. You guys got me on this now? Does this make a little more sense? So we're calling this function, and what we want to do is we want this to happen. We're passing this number in. However we want to use it, it just is accepting this in here. So we're saying, hey, take this and the number 3. When we get down here and we get to this, we're saying, okay, take this and that number 3, you're going to translate it into something. Well, okay, I'm getting that number 3, and I'm going to decide how I want to use it. And I'm deciding I want to use it as an int, and I want to use it as enemies to spawn. I could have called it, int and blueberries. I could have used for whatever I want to. Even if you said it was, pineapple, I could bring it in here and call it blueberries. I could use it whatever I want to use it for when I get it. I could use it for however I want to, but I want to use it right now as enemies to spawn. That's just plain and simple. However I want to use it is how I want to use it. Are you with me on this? I probably could have blown your mind just now, but I'm getting the number 3. You're passing me the number 3, and I'm going to use it as an int and enemies to spawn. Let's see if this still works. Again, don't go too far without making sure this works. Let's see if this works. I want to make sure I still get 3. Please don't try this. Yep, I still got 3. Awesome. Again, I try it because you know me, you've seen me mess up. I type things all the time. So that's a start. Now we're actually going to be doing some different things as well, because let's actually do this again. When I do this, let's go and take this out to maximize. I'm going to slow my speech down for just a second. Let's try this again, and I want you to watch this area here, and I want you to see what happens when we actually get all 3 of those. So let's go ahead and hit play, and hopefully you can see what's going on. Do you see it has enemies to clone right there? If I were to do that over and over again, in fact, let's do this again. Let's actually do this. I'm going to go ahead and go back into that code, and I'm actually going to do enemies to spawn, and I'm actually going to duplicate that 3 times. And you're going to see that there's 9 of those, right? I'm going to hit run, and I'm going to hit run. And so you're going to see, I probably didn't hit save. Let me go back to that and save. I did not save. Okay, let's save. You're going to see, we're going to hit play. Let's hit play. Always save and save often. Do you see there's 9 enemies? And even though they're falling off they just fell off, right? They're still there. And so we want to make sure that wherever we play, that they're really gone. Because no matter where I go with this, we don't want a bunch of these. You know what happens when the animals run off there. We want to make sure they get destroyed. So we know how to do this, right? We want to destroy as they fall off. Let me go back to my code and get rid of these. I don't need these. And so we want to make sure we destroy. You guys know the routine. So let's go ahead and destroy those. And in our enemies, the enemies we're going to destroy. We're going to do an avoid update. And if they destroy out of bounds, you guys got this. So I'm going to pause mine so I type this up, not wasting my recording time. So, this is if you need to pause this to get this in here, this is our typical destroy. If the transform position Y is less than -10, so that's below our playing field, then you're going to destroy the game object. So make sure you save that. And the next thing we're going to do is go into our spawn manager, back into our spawn manager. I forgot to save this. We are also going to we actually want to count. We're going to have a count of our enemy count, because this is how we're going to keep track of our enemy count, because this is what we're going to do to be able to increase our count of our players and to be able to change this number instead. So as they leave our playing field, we can actually increase the count. So let's go ahead and create a public int here where our variables are. Public int, and we'll call it enemy count. Ooh, goodness gracious, too many capitals. And we'll start by giving it equals 1 to start with, because that's what we start with, right? Let's go ahead and give it a count, start of 1, and maybe we don't. I guess that's what I want to start with. And then in our void update, oh, maybe we don't need to give it. I guess the enemy count, we're actually going to find the enemy length of the enemy count. Okay, so we are not going to set our enemy count to 0 because we are actually going to discover how many enemies we have on our scene. And to do this, we're actually going to go into our void update for the first time. And we're actually going to go ahead and figure out what our enemy count is by actually looking at our scene. So we're actually going to go in and actually discover how many enemies we have in our scene. And then we're going to look to see if we have no more enemies on our scene, then we're actually going to spawn more. So that is what we're going to do here. So still in our spawn manager, we are going to go in and create something where we're actually going to call our enemy count now. So enemy count, we're going to set what this is going to be equal to. Enemy count is going to be equal to find object of type. And then that's going to be we're going to look for the enemy. So enemy, and we're not just going to look for just the enemy itself. We're actually going to look for the enemy length because it's an array that we're looking for. So enemy type and array. So we've worked with arrays before. And since we're looking for multiple enemies, possible multiple enemies, we're going to look for how many enemies we have on our scene. So if you remember, we put enemies in our prefabs. That allows us to be able to have more than one enemy. So it might just be one, or might, so it might be enemy 0, or enemy 2, or enemy 1, enemy 0, enemy 1, enemy 2. So we can see multiple enemies. And if we have, so then we're going to say, all right, so now that we've set this, we're going to say, did I spell length wrong? Did I do something wrong with that? Did I spell something wrong here? Do I not do this here? So this is, what did I do here? Let's see what I did here. Find object type, enemy, enemy count. I always wonder what I did here. It's because it's not really int. LAN. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. I'll come back and take a look at that. So it should be length there. Let's go ahead and take a look at, I'll come back and take a look at that in just a second. So if our enemy count is less than 0, we're going to go in and spawn our enemy wave. So if enemy count is equal to 0, so equal to 0 means if it is 0, equals means equals 0, right? We should understand that. So if we just said equals 0, then we're looking at like we're comparing. So we're doing a comparison here of like, are we equal? We're not setting it to 0. If we say enemy count equals 0, find here. If we're doing a comparison here of, we're saying, is this equal to 0? That's where we get this equals to. That's how we're doing if the int left equals the int right, then we're doing a comparison here. That's saying, is it equal to one to the other? That's when we use that double equals sign. That's how we do the comparison in that. That's so you can kind of see what's going on there. If we just said, if we had 1 equals, then that would be setting the count to 0, and that's not what we want to do. So then we're going to go ahead and we're going to spawn enemy wave is what we're going to do. So we're going to spawn the enemy wave. So spawn enemy wave. Let's go ahead and take it from here, and we're going to get rid of this here. We're going to just take it. We're actually going to cut it from there. We don't need it, so we're going to put it there. I'm going to get rid of that number 3 there because we don't want that. let's see what, and we're going to put in the number 1 for right there. So we know that we're actually going to pass in the number 1 so that we actually, if it's 0, we want to spawn 1. So we're going to start with that. We're going to spawn 1. And we're going to start with that to see if this works. I'm not quite sure. Again, let me go ahead and pause this and if I can shoot this. Okay, so it's something as simple as the period between the parentheses and the word length. These are the simplest things that can go cattywampus on you. So again, sometimes just retyping something can help you to find your error. So I missed a period right there. So once we have that, go ahead and save that. And having this find enemy count, if enemy count is less than 0, it should spawn. I have the number 1 here. So it's going to pass in the number 1 into my game. Let me go ahead and see if this works. Ideally, if I do this and I hit play and I do this and let this bounce off. Oh no. Okay, well, let's see. Ideally, if this player goes off the board here, follow me off. Go ahead, follow me right off. It should spawn there. It spawned another. And again, if it goes off, it should just continue to spawn 1. So this is working. It's spawning 1. What we're going to do next is to make it multiply each time it spawns off the board. That is what we're going to do next. So increase the enemy count with each wave. So each time it goes off, we're going to create a wave number. So in our spawn manager, we want to create something called a wave number. So we're going to give it a public int and a wave number. And instead of in our I don't think I have that in there anymore. Oh, I see. They probably wanted you to have it in the start void at the beginning. They probably want you to have the spawn manager here to start with. So you had it still in the beginning as well. So you start off with it here as well as there. So you have, this is the wave number would go here. So I got rid of it altogether. Wave number. And then also in the update, in the void update, we have our if statement. Let's see. So, okay, this is where we can get a little lost in this, and I think a lot of students just kind of leave it as it is, where it just kind of continually spawns. So we're creating a wave number here. So our wave number, we're going to start off with our number 1 as our wave count. And our wave number is going to start off with our spawn. We're going to start the game with our wave number 1. And if our enemy count goes to 0, we're going to check to see what that wave number is. So we're going to go ahead and say if our wave count equals 0, we're going to check to see what that wave count is. So let's go ahead and say, let's go and replace this with wave. Oh, no, let's go and replace this with wave number. Wave number, so we know we're going to go our wave number, but how do we figure out what our wave number is? So in our if statement here, let's go ahead and encapsulate this with some parentheses because we definitely know we need to do something here in the long run. So we're going to say if our wave count ends up being 0, we need to actually have something. Oh, I guess we have this here. If we know that we don't need to do that. If there's 2 things that are going to happen here. One, if our wave count is 0, we're going to do 2 things. One, we're going to increase our wave number, and then it's going to just do what it's thing here. So sorry for this extra talking here. So wave number is going to do what we did like we did in the for loop. Wave plus plus does what? Wave plus plus increases the wave number by 1. So let's put a comment here. Wave number equals wave number plus 1. So each time through, it's going to increase our wave number plus 1. So now we're going to spawn plus, it's going to just, every time it's going to redo it and add in 1. So our wave number is going to increase. So the very first time through, when we start up, it's going to just give us our initial wave number of 1. And every time we get to 0, it's going to then say, hey, what was our wave number? Oh, it's 1? Oh, okay. Well, let's add 1 more, make it 2. Oh, we got to 0 again. What's it? 2? What is it? It's 2. Oh, well, now it's 3. So let's see if we got this to work. And this is really one thing. We're almost done because we have this many people. We definitely want to do the same thing for power-ups. Let's see if we get this to work. Let's do maximize on play. This makes it so much more fun. Maximize on play. Let's see if we can get this to work. We're just going to let this run for a little bit and see if we can get this to work. I'm not even going to play. I'm just going to let it run. Let me even fall off. That's 1. We should have 2. We should have 3. Isn't this awesome? Next time we should have 4. And they're all following me up the same side. Okay, awesome. So that's working. Well, we want to have more power-ups as well. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So we're going to do the same thing for our power-ups. Let's find our script for our power-ups. What script did we have our power-ups in? Do you remember? Was it in enemies? Or was it in player controller? Where do you think they are? It is in Spawn Manager. In our Spawn Manager, we have our power-ups. So we want to make sure that we increase our Spawn Manager. We want to declare we want to make sure that we give we actually want to make sure that I'm stuttering. So far, since we've only had one power up, we haven't really had to access the power up prefab. So we really need to access that power up prefab now. So we need to actually say, let's grab that power up prefab. So in our variables, let's go ahead and say, hey, let's get that prefab. So let's go to our public, since we definitely need to get it from the game. We're going to get a game object, capital G game object, and we're going to get the power up prefab. Now remember, we definitely have to get it from the game. So before we get much further, I'm probably going to go set that because I always forget. Let's save that and let's go get it real quick. So in our Spawn Manager, just like before, if we don't get it now, I will forget. So again, power up prefab is not, I don't have it set yet. So let's go get my power up from here, right from here, and get it and drag it into there. Awesome. So I have my enemy prefab and my power up prefab. Again, if you want to make sure you are sure where you got it from, make sure it's coming from your prefab folder. Power up and enemy. Awesome. Let's go back to our script. In our start, just like we have our spawn enemy wave happening, we want to make sure that we're instantiating our power up, and we are going to be creating we're going to almost be doing the same thing, but for our we're going to be doing the same thing for our power ups, but they're not going to really be like leaving the screen so much, as we're just going to be adding them to the screen, and we're just going to add in as we go. So let's go ahead and we're just going to instantiate an instance of them in the startup. We could actually create a function for this, but for right now, let's just go ahead and add them to the startup. And then if you'd like to create a function for this, you definitely can. So we're going to instantiate a power up prefab, and we're going to generate a spawn position. Did I call it all that? Hopefully I'm using the same thing. Generate spawn position. I sure did. And the comma, and then a power up. Ooh, let's not use this wrong spacing. Power up prefab dot transform dot rotation. So let's get those going the right direction. Rotation. Okay. So, and with the semicolon. And then so that's at the beginning of each game. We're going to instantiate that power up prefab in our spawn manager. And then in our void update, we definitely want to make sure that we, if our enemy count gets to 0, that not only are we going to go in and do our spawn manager wave, we're also going to add to our instantiate our. So we're going to do this as well. So we're going to do this, and we're just going to, let's go ahead and grab this here. We're going to do this again. So let's go ahead and grab this. And so grab that and paste that into here. That's going to allow us to bring the, that power up again. In there. So let's see what happens, and it brings it back. Let's see what happens again for each level. Now, ideally, you can actually create a wave of those. Let's see what happens if this works. Let's make sure that this works so we can bring it back each time. And then you can decide if you want to do a wave of those. And how would you do that? Let's see if we got this. Oh, we got 2 of them. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get rid of that first one. And we have 3. And we have 4. So ideally you would not have one to start with. So us not to have one to start with, let's go ahead and get rid of it from here, from this first one. So let's get rid of the power up here. We don't need it there. Let's get rid of it there. So that way when it starts, it'll show up. So we shouldn't start off with 2. That would be a mistake. We don't need 2 to start with. So let's go ahead and start again. Let's go ahead and save first. Save and start. And let's see what happens. So again, I have 1 and 1, and then I should have 2 and 2. And because we're going through the same cycle, we have our power ups. And if you see that the enemy can roll right through them, and it doesn't really do anything, because what happens is we really don't care if they roll through them. We want to just make sure we don't roll through them. So yeah, look at that. That's powerful. All right. So you try and play your game. That would be ideal for you to get through this game. That is the lesson recaps for what we have for 4.4. Ideally, you would learn how to keep score, to be able to show a score and so on and so forth. But that might happen with the number 5, which would be unit 5, which would be using the user interface. There is a challenge, which is doing a soccer script, and there are some more things for you to do in this assignment if you'd like. That is it for this, though. Hopefully you got the gist of what we did in this lesson. I know I was a little all over the place in this, but I'm definitely hoping that you got the gist of what we did in this last part of this lesson, with going over adding in the power up, having the wave, adding the power up to the wave, because we just added it to the wave. It actually added it in every time. So we just added in another one each time, which was kind of cool. All right, then. If you're my student, be sure and ask me questions if you have it. Otherwise, yeah, shoot me a screenshot of your game working, or give me a link to your games if you create some new ones.